Even the brightest sun must eventually face an eclipse, hiding the truth in temporary darkness. We explore those moments when life goes dark and the secrets that emerge before the light returns. Hit that subscribe button now and witness the unfolding of the hidden truth.
When my son-in-law called me on a Tuesday morning to tell me he had emptied my savings account and filed paperwork to have me removed from my own home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat down at my kitchen table, poured myself a cup of coffee, and I laughed. Not because it was funny, because he had no idea what I'd done the week before. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to where this really started. I'm 63 years old. I taught middle school science for 31 years in Roanoke, Virginia. I retired at 59 with a small pension, a house that was paid off, and about $80,000 I'd scraped together over decades of packing my own lunch and driving a car until the wheels practically fell off. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. I had built something. And after my husband passed, that was going on 7 years ago now, that stability was the only thing that kept me standing. My daughter is my whole heart. She always has been. Even when she was small, she had this way of looking at me like I held all the answers. And I would have moved mountains to deserve that look. She was smart, she was kind, and for a long time she had the kind of judgment I was proud of. Then she met him. I'll be honest with you. I didn't dislike him at first. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming. Easy smile, quick with a compliment, always just attentive enough to make you feel seen without making you feel watched. He worked in finance, he said. Investment consulting. He had a way of throwing numbers around in conversation that sounded impressive, if you didn't think too hard about what he was actually saying. My daughter was 31 when they started dating. She'd been independent her whole adult life. She had her own apartment, her own job as a hospital administrator, her own savings. I figured she knew what she was doing. They got engaged 14 months after they started dating. She called me from his apartment, and I could hear the happiness in her voice, and I held on to that. I told her I loved her, and I meant it completely. The wedding planning started almost immediately. Now, here's something I want you to understand, I offered. No one twisted my arm. My daughter came to me about 6 months before the wedding date, and she said, "Mama, the costs are getting out of hand." And I said, "How much do you need?" She looked embarrassed and said maybe 10 or 15,000 to cover the catering overage and the florist deposit. I wrote the check that weekend. I did not hand over my entire savings. I did not give anyone access to my accounts. I wrote a check for $15,000, and I did it gladly because she is my daughter, and that is what mothers do. What happened next, I did not find out about until much later. About 4 months before the wedding, my daughter mentioned that her fiancé had offered to help me consolidate my finances. She said it so casually, said he had some ideas about maximizing returns on my retirement savings, that he could set something up that would protect me long term. I told her I was fine. I told her I had a system and it worked for me. She nodded and didn't push it. He pushed it. Over the next several weeks, he would bring it up at family dinners. Once, twice. Always with that easy smile. Always framed as a favor, as expertise he was offering freely out of care for me, for my daughter, for our family's future. He sent me an article about interest rates. He left a folder on my kitchen counter once when they'd come for Sunday supper. Printed materials about an investment vehicle I'd never heard of. I threw the folder in the recycling bin. What I didn't know was that while he was doing all of this, he had also been helping himself to something else. When my husband died, I had added my daughter as a secondary account holder on my primary checking account. It was practical, in case something happened to me, in case there was an emergency, in case the world fell sideways and she needed access. It was an act of trust, an act of love. It had nothing to do with him. But they were engaged, and he had figured out, somehow, that her name was on that account. He never forged anything. He never broke any law that was immediately obvious. What he did was this. He convinced my daughter, my trusting, busy, overwhelmed daughter who was planning a wedding and managing a hospital department and trying to hold 17 things in her head at once, that I had agreed to let him manage a transfer. He told her it was something I'd mentioned to him privately. He had details. He had a whole story. And she believed him because she had no reason not to, and because she trusted me, and she thought that trust extended to him. $47,000 left my account over the course of 6 weeks. Small transfers. Nothing that would trigger an automatic alert at my bank. He was careful. He knew what he was doing. I found out because of a property tax notice. I pay my property taxes in 2 installments. I had the first one set up on autopay from that account. In March, I got a delinquency notice in the mail. I thought it was a mistake. I called the county. It was not a mistake. I logged into my bank account for the first time in about a month. I know, but I had been dealing with a health issue, a hip that had been giving me trouble, and I sat at my computer and I stared at the screen for a long time. $47,000. I want to tell you I reacted with dignity and calm, but the truth is I sat in that chair and I shook for about 20 minutes. Then I called my bank, then I called my daughter. She answered on the second ring. The moment I started speaking, her voice changed. I could hear it, that slight tightening, the breath she took. And I knew, before she even said a word, that she had known something was happening. Not everything, but something. She started crying before I finished explaining. She said she thought I'd approved it. She said he'd told her it was a structured financial move, that we'd discussed it, that I'd wanted to do it this way to avoid probate complications. She said she was sorry. She said his name in a way I hadn't heard before, flat and exhausted, like something she was already tired of carrying. I asked her if she was all right. Even then, sitting there with $47,000 gone, I asked her if she was all right. She said she didn't know. I told her I needed to handle some things and that I loved her. Then I hung up and I called a lawyer. Her name was a woman I'd been referred to by a friend from church, someone who handled civil litigation and had 30 years of experience in financial fraud cases. I met with her the next morning. I brought my bank statements, my account records, everything I had. She listened to me for 2 hours. She asked precise questions and wrote notes in a legal pad, and at the end she looked at me and said, "You have a case. This is theft by deception and possibly elder financial abuse under Virginia statute." I want to pause here for a moment because I know some of you are thinking, why didn't you press charges right away? Why did you wait? And the honest answer is that I had a daughter who was 3 months from her wedding, and I was trying to understand the full picture before I made any move that couldn't be undone. I am not a patient woman by nature, but I am a deliberate one. My lawyer advised me to gather documentation first, so I did. What I discovered during that documentation process was worse than I'd expected. He had not just taken money from my account. He had also, approximately 6 weeks before I found out, approached a real estate wholesaler about my house. He hadn't listed it. He couldn't, because the house was in my name alone, and I had never added him or my daughter to the deed. But he had made inquiries. He had told someone he represented the property owner and that the owner was looking to transition. He had gotten a preliminary offer of $340,000. He was planning to take the money and take the house. Whether my daughter knew about the house piece, I still don't know for certain. I choose to believe she didn't. I need to believe that. My lawyer filed a civil complaint. We also went to the police. A detective was assigned to the case, and she was thorough and she was good. She interviewed my daughter. My daughter told her everything she knew, and she cooperated fully. And I think that cooperation is what saved their relationship, mine and my daughter's, in the end. He was charged with felony theft and elder financial exploitation. Bond was set and he posted it. He was out within 48 hours, but he moved out of my daughter's apartment the same day he was arrested because she asked him to leave and he went. I think he knew by then that his leverage was gone. The wedding did not happen. My daughter called me the week after the arrest. She came to my house, and she sat at my kitchen table in the same chair she'd sat in since she was 8 years old, and she cried in a way I hadn't seen since her father died. Not pretty crying, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and ashamed. She kept saying she should have known. She kept saying she was sorry. I kept handing her tissues and telling her to stop apologizing for what someone else chose to do. We talked for 4 hours that night. We talked about her father. We talked about what love is supposed to feel like and how it had felt to her with him. We talked about the ways a person can look real without being real. I told her about the first time I suspected something was off, a comment he'd made about my pension being underutilized, back when they'd only been together 8 months. She hadn't heard it the way I heard it. That's not her fault. Love makes you translate things differently. I want to tell you about something else that happened, because it matters to the story. 3 weeks after his arrest, I received a phone call from a woman I had never met. She said her name, and I didn't recognize it, and she said she was his mother. I almost hung up, but something in her voice stopped me. She wasn't calling to defend him. She wasn't calling to ask me to drop the charges. She was calling to tell me she was sorry, not in a defensive way, Not in the way people say sorry when what they mean is please, but genuinely sorry. She said she had seen signs in him for years, that he had done something similar to a family friend a long time ago, and she had helped cover it up, and she had never forgiven herself for it. She said she didn't want to make excuses. She just wanted me to know that she knew what her son was, and that she was sorry he had come into my family's life. I didn't know what to do with that phone call for a long time. I'm still not sure I do. There's something painful about learning that the people closest to a person like that sometimes carry the weight of him too. That they've known longer than anyone, and that their knowing didn't stop anything. The civil case settled 14 months later. He repaid $31,000, not all of it, because the rest was gone, genuinely gone, spent on things I never fully tracked down. He accepted a plea deal on the criminal side. Felony conviction, 5 years probation, restitution order, no contact with me or my daughter. No prison time, which I will admit sat hard with me for a while. My lawyer said it was a reasonable outcome given the evidentiary specifics. I accepted it. I took the $31,000 and I put it back where it had always been. I also did 2 other things. First, I went to my bank and I removed my daughter from the account. Not because I don't trust her, because I trust her enough to not put her in a position like that again. We set up a formal power of attorney instead, properly drafted, witnessed, filed with my lawyer. If something happens to me, she has access. But there's a paper trail that protects her too, not just me. Second, I made a will, I know. I should have done it years ago. My husband always meant to, and then he died suddenly, and I meant to after him, and then the years kept passing. I have no excuse, I made one now. My daughter is doing better. She went to therapy, which I am proud of her for. She's been seeing someone for about 8 months now. Not him, obviously. Someone completely different. Someone she met through a colleague. She doesn't talk about him much. When she does, it's with a kind of clear-eyed recognition that took her a long time to get to. Last month, she called me to ask if she could come for Sunday supper, and she brought that new person along to meet me. And she watched my face the whole dinner the way she used to watch my face when she was small, like she was checking whether I held the answers. I don't hold all the answers. I never did, but I held my ground. And sometimes that's the only thing that saves what you've built. I said at the beginning that when he called me to tell me what he'd done, I laughed. Here's what he didn't know. 4 days before that call, I had spoken with my lawyer about the missing money. I had already filed the initial police report. The case was already open. When he called me that Tuesday morning, confident and calm, listing off what he'd taken and implying that making noise about it would hurt my daughter, he didn't know that the trap had already closed around him. He was calling to warn me when the thing he was warning me about had already begun to unravel him. That's why I laughed. Not because it wasn't painful. It was the most painful thing I'd been through since I buried my husband. But sometimes when you've spent a lifetime building something careful and steady, and someone tries to take it apart while you're watching, there's a moment where the thing they didn't plan for becomes the only thing that matters. He didn't plan for me to check my account. He didn't plan for me to call a lawyer instead of crying and waiting. He didn't plan for my daughter to tell the truth when a detective sat down across from her. He didn't plan for his own mother to call me and fill in the pieces of a history he'd kept hidden. He planned for me to be a woman who would be too embarrassed, too old, too tired, too afraid of losing her daughter to fight back. He was wrong about all of it. I still live in my house. I still have my coffee at my kitchen table every morning. The property taxes are paid. The deed is in my name, alone, as it has always been. And on Sunday evenings, if she can make it, my daughter sits in that same chair at that same table, and we talk the way we always have. That is everything I was protecting. That is everything I refused to let go of. And I would do it all again.